So now, without further ado, Cara McLennon from the Morton Arboretum and CRTI will talk to us about oaks. Now, Cara is a very fortunate person because she actually grew up in Lisle, where the Morton Arboretum is situated, and she still lives there. And I learned that Lisle is called the Arboretum Village for obvious reasons. She was a biology major. She had, after college, a variety of hands-on jobs that required good judgment. Like, for example, she was a nanny for a while and she did some other things. She worked in the health field. And then during the pandemic, like so many of us, she had a change of heart and decided to go in a different direction. So she studied horticulture. A subject dear to my heart, and she got a job at the Arboretum, and has been there ever since. So it's pretty great. And she is officially a steward for CRTI. So without anything else, take it away, Carol.
Hello, thank you so much. Hold on, I've got to figure out how to share my screen here without. Okay. Slides. Share. Okay. All right, how's that look on everybody else's end? Good?
Looks, well, you haven't, there, now it looks great.
Is it looking? Okay, good. Fantastic.
Yeah, good.
All right. Hello, everyone. As already mentioned, my name is Cara McLennon. I am a steward with the Chicago Region Trees Initiative program of the Morton Arboretum, and I'm here to talk about what may be the most important tree in the Americas. Sorry, I'm adjusting my screens over here. The mighty oak. So why are they important? What are some common species we can go over? How to landscape with them, and what makes them so successful? First, I'd like to talk a little bit about Oaktober. Oaktober is a program that started, let me see. In 2015, the governor of Illinois proclaimed that October would officially be Oaktober, Oak Awareness Month, a time to celebrate oaks and everything that they do for people, as well as promote the planting and care of these important trees. Every individual, organization, community, park district, forest preserve, and or public landowner or manager can play an important role in celebrating oaks and oak ecosystems across Illinois throughout the month of October. And October was chosen because this is a time when oaks produce their acorns and they start looking very pretty with the color changes. We have tons of information at chicagorti.org about how you can celebrate Oaktober with us. And a fun little oak fact is the genus name Quercus actually comes from Celtic instead of Latin, and it means good tree. I'd also like to talk a little about the Chicago Region Trees Initiative that I work for. So we are a branch of the Morton Arboretum dedicated to protecting and expanding the tree canopy in the Chicago region in a variety of ways. We offer grants, we plant trees, we try to inform people about trees and what vital infrastructure they are in the urban environment. And we have a number of programs, including community tree plantings, helping people get ordinance passed to protect trees in their local community, tree planting and care training, carbon credits, oak ecosystem recovery program, all kinds of stuff. So you can check out our website for that if you want more information. And the Morton Arboretum, more in general, is an internationally recognized has an internationally recognized oak specimen collection. If you want to go celebrate Oaktober over there, we have a bunch of different specimens from all over the world, including some very rare ones that you may not see anywhere else. So without further ado, let's talk about oaks. I feel like I can't talk about oaks without talking about everything they do for the ecosystem. How many of you have heard the term Keystone species? It refers to an organism that has a disproportionately positive effect on their ecosystem, and oaks are a stupendous example of that. An estimated 2,300 species of wildlife, a lot of which are invertebrates, over 1,000 invertebrates, live among oaks, and about 326 globally depend completely on oaks. If the oak disappears, over 300 of these species are just gone. Bananas, I agree. A large part of that starts with the caterpillars, which in turn feed birds, and those birds feed birds of prey and foxes and coyotes and things like that. But they're also hosts to a number of parasitoid wasps, the caterpillars are, and those wasps are valuable pollinators to other plants, and they are also host to yet another layer of parasites. Um, and then there are, of course, galls that grow on oak trees. Um, and actually, I'm going to sneak in a little clip from Doug Talame here because I really like this little clip about oak galls. I highly recommend watching the entirety of this talk. It's an hour and 30 minutes, but it's really, really good. But this clip I especially like. Let me know if anyone can't hear it well or whatever.
So plant hormones into the bud when she's doing it. Remember, the cells in a bud are meristematic cells. They're essentially stem cells. They can go in any direction, and the synipid gall wasp wants them to go in a particular direction that will make a species-specific house for them. We call it a gall. People say it's like a cancerous growth. It's just the opposite. Cancerous growths are uncontrolled growth. They just grow and grow and grow. Galls are highly controlled growth. And not only is it controlled by the synipid galler, it's controlled by the oak itself. It's a compromise between what the oak wants and what the galler wants. And it creates a species-specific swelling, and that's where the gall larva is contained. This is another species of galler. It's laying an egg in one of my oak buds last spring. I tagged that little stem so I could follow it, and that's the gall that resulted from that oviposition. There are a lot of species of gallers out there. Worldwide, 5,000 species of synipid gallers that are associated with oaks. California has 90 species. You've got a very large galler community. A single oak tree can support 70 species of gallers. It's very hard to find. It may be impossible to find an oak that does not have a galler associated with it. And many of these galls are hollow. This is the apple oak gall or the oak apple gall. You can see it written both ways. And if you cut it open, the gall is in a little spherical disc in the center here, and then there's a lot of air. And then there's the outside of the gall. What is all this wasted space for? Well, it turns out that synipid gallers have more natural enemies, more parasitoids, more members of other families of Hymenoptera. This is a pterimid parasitoid that want to lay their eggs in the synipid larvae. And this is what they do it with, a very long sword-like ovipositor. So what the gall has to do is keep this ovipositor away from the larva. So the distance, the air-like distance between the galler and the outside of the gall has to be longer than this ovipositor. Otherwise, the pterimid can reach it. Now, there is a period of growth when the gall is very small where the pterimid can reach it, and that's when the galler is at risk, but it grows very quickly and puts the galler out of reach of these natural enemies. This is Pterimus californicus. It has the longest ovipositor of any pterimid, and that has resulted in the largest gall in North America on Quercus garryana, the Oregon oak, or the Oregon white oak, because the distance between the galler and the outside of the gall has to be longer than that ovipositor. A lot of variation in gall shape and size and color, and some of them are quite pretty. Some of them look like plant diseases. Some of them grow on the leaf itself. Some of them grow on the stems. Some of them look like candy. And I'll tell you, the galls in particularly Northern California are the prettiest galls in the country. This is from Northern California. Some look like that. Some do look like plant diseases. Spindle gall, there's a man named Tim Boomer who loves taking pictures of gallers. They're on his Flickr site. Some look like candy. These again are from the West, very cool looking. This is a pottery type shaped gall in my yard. This is my favorite. I call it the little gnome house gall. It's actually called the mushroom gall wasp that makes it, but it's very, very cute. A brain gall in my yard. Here's this is a single leaf that produced 4 galls, but there were multiple adults coming out of each gall. So this single leaf produced, you can count them up. I don't know how many hundreds of gallers were produced by that single leaf. And galls have played an interesting history in the recorded history, or interesting role in the recorded history of we humans. If you grind up a gall like this, and that's the exit hall. That's where the gall comes out. You grind it up and you combine it with particular chemicals. It makes an indelible black ink. And that is the ink that our recorded history has been recorded with. The Bible was written with gall ink. The Magna Carta was written with gall ink. The Declaration of Independence was written with gall ink. So all the writings of the monks and the scribes in the Middle Ages used gall ink. So without galls, who knows? Maybe we never would have even learned to read.
That's just a little clip I wanted to sneak in because I feel that Dr. Talame has really good examples, really cool pictures of different galls that we can appreciate. Okay. All right. Can everyone see all right still? Just want to make sure the slideshow is still working correctly.
Yep, looks
All
good.
right, fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm gonna, oh, hold on. So I also wanted to have a little quote from Bargel et al. In a paper published in International Oaks, who said, with over 600 species, Quercus is possibly the greatest natural ecosystem forming genus in the world. Many other trees might exceed the commercial value of oaks, but with regard to biodiversity, they have few parallels in the living world. Outside tropical rainforests, oaks are the greatest biodiversity-centric plants on the planet. And then I have an example here. This is actually a local garden. It was in Naperville. It was featured in Good Natured Landscapes, and I thought it was an excellent example of a little oak garden because I wanted to talk about planting oaks in our own yards. I understand you guys are big native gardeners, so you may recognize some of the species I have coming up. But most oaks are big, and while there are smaller options, and they're generally slow, they're also generally slow growing. So a lot of people don't plant oaks. You know, they oftentimes would prefer to plant something fast growing and showy like a maple. But while maples are native, there's a lot of them, and that fast growing, you know, it's kind of a live fast, die young. They don't live nearly as long as the oaks. The oak can live, on average, they have a lifespan of like 900 years, depending on species, depending on area, but still, it's even among trees, it is a very long-lived species. And we also want to make sure we are not planting too many maples because, again, while they are native, they're overplanted. And we want to ensure that there is enough tree diversity in the Chicago canopy to ensure that things like emerald ash borer and Dutch elm disease don't decimate our canopy again. So diversity is very, very important. And here are a few of my favorite native shade plants that I highly recommend planting under your oaks because, again, a lot of people don't really know how to garden with oaks. And this is the kind of garden that you can cultivate under her branches. They are, their leaves are thick and tough, and they're full of these toxic tannins that they use to outcompete other plants in the area. So the best thing to plant under an oak is a native shade plant. Things like jack-in-the-pulpit, false Solomon seal, Virginia bluebells, trilliums, May apples, bleeding hearts, ostrich ferns, Jacob's ladder, foam flower, bloodroot is my mama loves bloodroot. Wild ginger is my dad's favorite, and really any native shade plant will thrive under an oak, and they won't have to worry about competing with weeds and things. Like I have a native shade garden in my yard. The only weeding I have to do is pulling out the May apples because they get a little overexcited. I do not have weed problems in my shade garden because the oaks with those big, thick leaves, they can take up to 3 years to break down. So they make really stupendous, mulch, but they're also habitat for insects. We talk about every layer of the oak tree, from its leaves to its bark to its, fallen bodies. It's all habitat, and fallen leaves are habitat for things like fireflies, lacewings. A bunch of different butterflies will form their cocoons and hide under the leaf litter through the winter, and it keeps them warm. Bees, beetles, all kinds of stuff. And this is just one of the many ways oaks build ecosystems. So I encourage you all to leave the leaves, pretty please. I have a big bed underneath my oaks, and of course I rake them up around the grass, but I highly recommend people leave their leaves, especially oak leaves, in the bed underneath the canopy of the tree. So the oak, family is pretty big. It's mostly red oaks, and I wanted to let me see. Like I said, there are over 600 different species worldwide. Just 21 of them alone are native to Illinois. And of course, I'm going to be focusing on our native species because otherwise we would be here for days. Blissful days talking about oaks, but days nonetheless. We don't have time for that. But you guys want to hear an annoying little song I've learned about remembering oaks? Hold on, here we go. Too bad you're learning it. It goes, no, 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 your oaks, this is how they grow. Red oak, white oak, bur oak, pin oak, black oak down below. Yeah. Embarrassing, but it is a very useful little song. So you do the red oak way up here, white oak is a little lower, bur oak is kind of, you know, they're a little more wonky looking, and then black oaks grow in sandy soil. So that's an annoying little song you can sing for other people. I recommend it. It annoys my coworkers. Let's see. Oops. There we go. So I wanted to go over a few of the common species we have in the area. This is by no means all of them, but this is just a few of them. And white oak is a big one. She has like 50 to 80 feet tall and 100-foot spread. That refers to the, you know, the branches of the tree, not the trunk. It would be insane to have a 100-foot wide trunk. They like moist, well-drained soil, and that word soil is missing an L, fantastic. But if you're looking for something a little smaller, there's the street spire oak, which I believe gets more like 45 tops and a much smaller spread. So that's an option to consider for smaller gardens. The bur oak, she's a workhorse. She makes a fantastic street tree. She is 70 to 80 feet tall and wide, and she tolerates a wide range of soils. And she's got these fuzzy little acorns. Really, well, I say little, they're actually pretty big acorns, but they're quite fuzzy. And let me see. So yeah, one of my favorite species, the bur oak, because they're much easier to identify than other oaks, just because they've got these scrungly, you know, branches and bark, and they've got those furry little acorns. And I call it a snatched waist on the leaf. You'll see here that there's that very dramatic lobe dip in the middle of it, but the front of it is sort of like a shovel. So that's a helpful ID tool. The pin oak. Not as commonly planted because while it is native, it doesn't do super well in soils disturbed by humans, and it suffers greatly from chlorosis due to high soil pH. It prefers more acidic soil. And this can be a very serious problem in this species. So pin oaks aren't super recommended in urban landscapes just for that reason. Unless you can find a, you know, a particular hardy cultivar, and there's always different cultivars of these different species. And chlorosis, I'll point out, if for those of you who don't know, is something that can afflict a lot of different species of trees, where if you look at the leaves, you'll notice that they have this kind of yellowness around the outside, but there you see the color in the veins along it. And that usually has to do with nutrients in the soil or nutrient availability in the soil that has to do with pH. So, fun fact. Next is the black oak. Not as commonly seen in urban environments, although they do make pretty good street trees. They just don't seem to be as commercially as available as other species. I'm not sure why, but they prefer sandy soil. So you see more of these out by the dunes and things. And they have this little acorns. I like the scaly pattern on their acorns. They're so cute. The northern red oak is a little bit of a faster growing species. It's also a little less disease tolerant than, say, the bur oak, and I misspelled tolerant. Fantastic. Ignore that. But yeah, a little less disease tolerant compared to the bur oak or the white oak, but they still make very solid street trees. They have beautiful leaves, and they turn this kind of greenish pink color. And when they first emerge, a dark lustrous green in the summer, and then kind of a russet to bright red in the autumn. And they're tolerant of a lot of salt and air pollution, which makes a very good tree for exposed areas. Next, I want to talk about the resilience of oaks. So oaks are a highly adaptable genus of trees, primarily because they are what we call promiscuous. Yes, that's a botanical term. Citrus trees are also a good example of a promiscuous plant. It means that they are very, very good at hybridizing. So that's also kind of the annoying thing about oaks, is that sometimes when you put just any old oak tree in front of me, I don't know what that is, because not only do the leaves of an oak tend to vary a lot, even just on one individual, who knows what kind of hybridized, variety of this tree is, and who knows how that presents physically, taxonomically versus genetically. And we don't really know until we actually test them. But it is still a very evolutionary advantageous tool that they use. So oak trees show a lot of what is called introgression. And introgression is basically the sharing of genetics between different closely related species through repeated crossbreeding in a given population. They do this so much, in fact, a population of different species of oaks, all living together in the same forest, can have more in common, up to 50% of their genetics in common with each other, in comparison to their own species from a different place that they're not sharing genetics with. Despite looking outwardly like their own species. It's silly is what it is. But it's also, like I said, evolutionary advantageous. I named all these species we have and where they do well, but that can depend a lot on the individual and where they came from. And that makes a lot of sense, because a tree that has a lifespan of like 900 years, that it can be difficult for a long-living species to adapt to changes. So the hybridization is a very good tactic. But unfortunately, we are losing a lot of our oaks. Like I said, very long-lived species, but the trees we have in our area are reaching the end of their lives. We have a lot of mature oaks, which is fantastic, but because of a lot of invasive species, sorry, there's a bug in here. Because there's a lot of invasive species, like even just garlic mustard or buckthorn and all these things, they shade out these young little baby oaks. And like I said, they're not as popular to be planted, as street trees in people's gardens and things like that, because people don't realize what a fantastic ecosystem builder they are. And like I said, because people are kind of impatient, they want something that grows quickly, but we really, really do need to be planting our oaks. Because we just don't have the young trees to replace them. They are very, oh wait, did I talk about the resilience? Yes, I did. I'm gonna move on. And I also want to talk about the history of the land that we live in. So once upon a time, there were a whole lot of oaks and a whole lot of prairies. Actually, right before then, there were the glaciers. When the glaciers finally receded, there were two species that moved in, two very important species that moved in. There was the oaks, and it was humans. Humans have only been here about 10,000 years, but we have been neighbors for that whole time. And the indigenous people, let me see, I'm on the wrong slide. Where did I go? Yes. So let's talk about, for a moment, I'm sorry if I'm jumping around, let's talk about controlled burns. Oaks love fires. It is very good for them. They can survive it because, they survive it. Let's go with that. I'm not going to go into the full chemistry of it, but oaks are very good at surviving fires. And you'll notice that there aren't actually a whole lot of fires naturally in our area, and there may be the occasional lightning strike, but this is a very wet area. So why has this species adapted so well to fire? Well, that's because for the last 10,000 years that other species, humans, have been conducting controlled burns. Indigenous people were ecologists that we are only just now kind of catching up to. And when settlers came in, and they didn't understand this practice of burning. They didn't want to understand this practice of burning, so they put a stop to it. And that has been detrimental, along with other things, to oak ecosystems. So this is our past oak ecosystems and prairie wetlands from 1830. Oh, well, that got kind of scrunched. But today we have a lot less oaks. We have, I think the statistic is like 30-something% of our original canopy of oak trees. So like I said, they are very resilient species, but the difficult thing about oaks is they are very vulnerable to disease, and they are vulnerable to soil disturbance. And those are two things that humans are very, very good at. So, all right. I have more slides, but if you'd like more information about the oak ecosystem recovery plan, I encourage you to check out Chicago Region our website, chicagorti.org, as well as the chicagowilderness.org. Sorry, I thought I had more slides here, but here we are. Do we have any other questions? I love the Q&A section. You can also feel free to ask me any questions about trees in general, particularly urban forestry trees, anything like that. So yeah, that's my piece. Stop sharing.
So I have a question, or actually,
Yes, of course.
we have one person, and then while other people, write down their questions, wants to know about the street spire because he's concerned that cultivars are clone generated and so they lack biodiversity.
That is an interesting idea. So at CRTI, we make a point of purchasing, we actually don't prefer cloned trees for that exact reason. We prefer to get trees that are grown from seed, oaks, and all of the other species that we collect. And we also get them from multiple different nurseries for that exact reason. And we did talk about that, is that oaks are very genetically diverse, and we don't, any given individual from a given species can have a lot of traits that might not be consistent across the species. You know what I mean? So that is a very good point. We want to avoid cloning and having too much of the same genes. We really want to make sure that we are encouraging the genetic diversity that is natural in our oaks. It's a good question.
Yeah, so maybe not get street spires.
Oh, I'm seeing someone's asking, how do you treat chlorosis in oaks? That is a very good question with a not super simple answer. So for starters, it depends on the species because different species have different soil preferences. It a lot of the time has to do with the alkalinity. Usually it means that the soil isn't acidic enough or is too acidic. White oak, yeah, white oaks get that a lot. You may unfortunately have to get your soil tested. You may want to add some fertilizer. It is common that they are lacking iron or manganese a lot of the time. I think it's manganese. And you can also consult an arborist. You can actually consult, the Morton Arboretum has a plant clinic that is free. You can come in or you can call us. You can bring in a branch. Any questions that you have, they will help you out with that. Yeah.
So before we read more questions, let me ask one question because
Of course.
maybe swamp white oaks are also touted as good trees for gardens. So I know it's part of the white oak family, but if you could just talk a little bit because they do have slightly different characteristics than
About which ones did you say? Swamp white?
Swamp whites.
Oh yes, swamp white oaks. We plant a lot of them through CRTI. I really should have given them their own slide instead of just doing white oaks. But yes, Quercus bicolor. They're separate species. They are very tolerant of a lot of different kinds of soils. They tolerate drought. They tolerate wet. They tolerate salt, alkalinity, acidity, all kinds of stuff. So they are very stupendous street trees, but they are not immune to the chlorosis. They can still get it sometimes.
It's good to know.
And they also have, especially in young trees, they have very fuzzy, like leaf undersides. That's a useful identification tool.
Right, and they flash white. And they don't have the lobes either. Like
No, not they kind of do,
they're
but
fan-shaped.
they're more shallow and rounded and cute. Yeah, they are. I really love swamp whites. They're great.
So if you want a white oak, but somewhat smaller, somewhat better behaved, put in a swamp white. Okay, so if you want to read your own questions, that's fine. I suggest that you start up a little higher because Diane Balin would like to know if people are collecting acorns to plant to retain genetic material.
Yes, they are. That's part of the oak recovery program, and you can read more about that on the website. But yes, people collect acorns. Sometimes people like to rescue little volunteer seedlings from bad spots and save them. Of course, you have to be careful. Collecting from your own yard, perfectly legal. But if you're collecting on private or public property, you have to get permission. You don't want to take all of them, of course, because seeds are an important food source in the ecosystem. But yes, I would highly recommend collecting seeds if you have the proper permission. There's a few tricks to it, like the floating trick to make sure that they're viable. Because acorns are a stupendous food source, not just for birds and for squirrels and things, but also a lot of insects. Weevils and beetles like to burrow in them. So yeah, I highly recommend collecting your own acorns and propagating your own trees.
Yeah, she says she has a McCormick estate red oak, one of the 100 trees they raised from acorns in their greenhouse.
That's lovely.
And
I didn't know about that program.
I didn't either. That's really cool.
Oak Park has a lot of historic.
Yes.
We have legacy trees that people collected the acorns and Possibility Place grew them, didn't they, Laura? I think.
Yeah, I thought actually the Morton Arboretum was involved
Oh, okay.
as well, but I don't, so I didn't know the history of that program very well, and unfortunately the woman who did it passed away.
Yeah. No, just
But several oaks were planted as a result of that program, and I happen to live in an oaky area of Oak Park. We got several parkway trees along a street nearby, and then in our main sort of showplace park, they planted a whole oak grove there based on
it's pretty
from those trees. It was really wonderful.
Love that.
Yeah.
So here's someone who wants to know the best way to transplant the little oaks growing in my yard from acorns.
Good question. So you want to make sure that you go pretty deep, because a lot of the time those young oaks have pretty deep tap roots and you really don't want to disturb the roots if you can avoid it. So, you know, get a good size. I'd say, I guess it depends on the size of the tree. You really do kind of have to eyeball it, but I would go like half a foot down, surprisingly, to make sure you get the entirety of that little tap root. Honestly, I think it's better to start with acorns and put them where you want them to ensure that you don't damage those roots, because that can be a little tricky for a baby oak.
I've actually done that before, inadvertently
Yeah.
cut off the tap roots.
Yeah, because that's their first thing. They're trying to get really stable. They're trying to find water, but it can make them a little tricky to transplant. Fortunately, there were a lot of them this year.
Yeah, there were. There really were. There's been a lot of regeneration
Yes.
in the forest reserves. And,
Ooh, that brings me to a stupendous topic, which is masting. Oaks and all the other trees in the beech family. Oaks are part of the beech family, by the way, are well known for this, where they have, they have these really big, delicious seeds, and lots of things want to eat them, which is to some effect to their advantage, which we can get to later. But in order to make sure that all their seeds aren't eaten up, gobbled up every year, they have what are called mast years, where they employ basically a you can't eat us all tactic. So they drop a ton of acorns, and it's called predator satiation. So they ensure that there are so many acorns that they can't possibly eat all of them, and there will definitely be survivors. And this is often triggered by environmental factors. So last summer we had a drought, which means the trees kind of panicked a little bit and decided, all right, it's time to go. Let's make as many babies as we can to ensure our genetic legacy. Yeah.
yeah, and then maybe you could follow up with talking about a little bit about the role of jays and squirrels.
Yes, great question. I swear I had a slide on that, but I think I lost it. Sorry about that. But so jays spread acorns up to a mile away from the tree, which doesn't seem terribly far, but to a tree, that's quite far away. She doesn't have legs, she can't walk away. And jays don't cache them the way like squirrels and raccoons do. They will take raccoons, squirrels, and woodpeckers do. And they'll take individual seeds and plant them all over the place, but they won't remember where they planted them. So they're producing more trees. And multiple different species of jays have this symbiotic relationship with oaks. And in fact, it's kind of to the tree's advantage to have delicious seeds for that exact reason, because critters like the jays, but also rodents and things, will pick up these seeds and move them. And in fact, oak seeds can survive being partially eaten, and they'll still germinate. Like a third of the acorn can be eaten by a rodent, and it will still sprout. Isn't that amazing?
It is
Yeah,
amazing.
it's amazing.
Mhm.
It's totally amazing.
And I read a really great book called Oak, all about oaks. It's just oak.
Yeah.
And he said that it's partly because of jays that after the Ice Age, oaks migrated north much faster than you would expect them to, and still are, because of the jays.
I didn't know that part. I knew the jays were a significant factor in how like far and wide oaks are spread, but I didn't know it was specifically after the Ice Age, because they did move in very quickly after the glaciers receded, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. So people are trying to figure it out, but they're still moving. I mean, they're still moving north. It's really quite remarkable. Okay, so let's see. What else do people want to know?
Martha Martha asked about, she has a chinkopin oak in her front
Yes.
yard, but she says she doesn't know much about it. Is it native to this area? She's in Elmhurst.
Yes.
And does it have
Chinkopin.
as many wildlife benefits as red or white oaks?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Chinkopin oaks are not quite as commonly planted just because sometimes they have more issues in our area. Our soil can be a little finicky, but they are native. They do very well, and they absolutely have all of the benefits of all the other native oaks. Every single oak species is a keystone species. So absolutely. That's great that you have a chinkopin.
Yeah, and I guess my question would be too, it's one of those ones that can develop chlorosis, isn't, and so.
Yeah.
So
All
yeah,
oaks can, but
you wanna
chinkopins
know.
especially are kind of finicky, and I hear a lot of people complaining about them. They're just a little bit more delicate, and they don't do quite as well in urban environments, but I've seen quite a few thrive. It really does depend on the individual.
And I know they're in the forest preserves. If you go out to the woods, you
Mhm.
will see.
They're out there.
Oh, that's interesting. It seems to be a popular parkway tree, at least in Oak Park.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Um,
that's good. I'm
I
glad they're
wasn't
doing
sure,
well.
wasn't sure why, but I guess, are they faster growing maybe
I think they
than
are a
some
little bit
oaks?
faster growing. I'd have to double check, but I do believe they are. Yeah.
I have a theory that they
Ooh.
might do better in North Oak Park or where you are, Laura, because that was oak openings, it was oak woodland, and that in
Could be.
Yeah,
South Oak Park was a prairie. And I've
Yep.
seen chinkopins develop chlorosis down there. And I know so it might even be microhabitats around here, in one block
Maybe.
it'll
Yeah,
work,
that
one
is
block it won't.
Oak
that is
Park has definitely got a
interesting.
great canopy.
I am privileged to live amongst many mature oaks. They're quite beautiful. But we do have the problem here in my neighborhood of when the oaks come down, the oaks don't go back up. People are not replacing them, and I don't know if you have any suggestions about, or they'll take down 3 oaks and put back 1 oak,
I
or
know, and
because
it's
they want the openness.
yeah, and it's devastating because, one little sapling is not going to do the work of a really big mature tree. And
Right.
oaks actually make up the most like biomass of any other tree species in the area, which is surprising because there comparatively aren't that many like individual trees, but the things are just so big. They have huge biomass, they're fantastic carbon sinks. So that is really disappointing because we really do need to be replacing our oaks because if we don't have the
Yeah.
oaks, we don't have an ecosystem.
Well, and they like to grow together. I mean,
They do. That is another thing
fir oaks
that's
will
a little
grow out.
controversial actually in urban forestry. So the idea of planting a tree is we do these tiny little rows and each tree has as much space as it wants to grow. But that's not how they grow in the forest. You know what I mean? They kind of rely on each other. They're a little more social than we give them credit for. A grove of oaks is going to withstand wind and things a lot better than one individual tree withstanding all that wind. So it's a little complicated because it can be hard to plant trees that way in urban environments. And someone asked about spacing of oaks. I'll bring it up just because it's relevant. Again, it really kind of depends on circumstances. The bigger spacing can be better for things like pruning and, monitoring the size of the tree and safety and all of that, but it is kind of better for them to be planted closer together. They also sometimes share nutrients with each other. They can better cultivate the mycorrhizal fungi. Oak trees have really stupendous relationships with fungi underneath their roots. And a lot of that has to do with being planted close together and having a living soil,
I always imagine too, though, if you have one oak and you plant lots of natives underneath it, that helps the oak and the forbs and the grasses. It does still form a community, even if the oak is kind of lonely. So
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got lots of questions. Recommended spacing, we talked about that. And what someone would like you to explain the float trick.
Yes, I kind of glossed over that. I'm sorry about that. So the float trick is basically you plop an acorn in cool, still water, and if it floats, it's no good. It's probably not going to germinate. It's probably got a bug, it's probably rotting, something like that. But if it sinks, that's a good, heavy, viable seed. So we get a whole bunch of acorns and just dump them in a bucket. That's a really good way to weed out the weak ones.
All right, and someone says, please give us some tips on care and feeding of newly planted oaks. What to do and for how long? Good question.
Okay, so when you first plant a tree, especially an oak, you want to give it about 10 gallons of water every week, depending, sometimes more if it's hot, sometimes less if it's raining a lot. I highly recommend mulching. Go as wide as you can around the base, around like the canopy of the tree. When you plant it, it's good to add a little bit of compost. That's ideal. But really, the most important thing is making sure it's not having to compete with grass is another thing. That's true of all trees, but oaks especially, they really don't want to compete with turf grass. And when you are mulching, pretty please don't engage in volcano mulching. That is, oh, that drives me crazy. So a lot of time you go around and you see a tree that's got mulch on it and there's this big mound of mulch right up against its trunk. That is so bad for the tree, especially oaks, because they're so vulnerable to disease. That retains moisture, which in the wrong area, which encourages disease and insects. So donuts, not volcanoes. So the best thing you can do for your little tree is keep it watered, keep it mulched, and don't volcano mulch it.
Yeah, do you do that do you water it for the first 2 years or 1 year? Or
We water for the first 3 years to make
3
sure
years?
it's well established. Yes.
Oh,
And
wow.
I still supplementary water. I've got like 200, maybe 300-year-old oaks in my own backyard. And when there's droughts, sometimes I run the hose on them because I don't want to lose them.
I think I'm gonna go right out after this program and I've got a young oak out in my backyard. I better go.
Mhm.
I'm gonna do it. Okay, so here's someone who's, I have lots of old oaks by the Arboretum, but I'd like to get another generation going. Thank you. That was from
Yeah.
Welcome. I absolutely encourage you to do that. And so a fun thing about oaks is people talk about how big they get, and that's absolutely true. But a young sapling oak can bide its time actually in a sapling shape if it's in the shade. In the forest, it sometimes has to wait decades actually to get a break in the canopy, to wait for one of the mother trees to come down and spread that light and give her a shot at shooting up, because oak trees really like a lot of light. And so sometimes people tell me, like, I've got this little oak growing in my yard, but it's overshadowed by this maple. And I'm like, leave it. The oak is patient. It may outlive that maple and eventually prevail. So please and thank you. Plant a new generation of oaks if you can. I'd be really grateful for that.
Somebody up here said he added, or she, they added iron and the leaves turned orange. I think that was to do with the chinkapins.
That's interesting. I don't know a whole lot of tree pathology, but may have been too much iron. Sometimes it has to do with you may add nutrients, but it's not necessarily bioavailable, and that has to do with the acidity of the soil. So that's something to consider.
And then last question so far, have you heard of two-lined chestnut borers harming oaks?
I haven't. Like I said, I don't know a whole lot of the pathology. I have heard of the chestnut borers, but I haven't heard of them affecting oaks.
Yeah.
If anybody knows anything about that, I would love to hear about it, but I haven't heard anything about it.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's all the questions. Laura, do you have any questions that you would like to ask?
Shoot, I did. Oh, so Cara, you mentioned mulching
Yes.
under, but you also showed a picture of a beautiful native garden on a parkway. So is there a
Honestly, I don't know. I haven't done
preference?
much research on it specifically, but I would
Okay.
guess that it would be preferable to have a native garden under the tree rather than just mulch. Mostly the mulch is just about retaining moisture and keeping the tree from having to compete with turf grass. But if it's in a garden bed with other trees and it gets to keep its own leaves as mulch, that would actually be preferable. I think having a garden underneath the tree would be preferable than just mulch.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
I've heard that you, if you're going to plant a native garden under an oak, do it while the oak and the plants are small.
Yes.
So you don't disturb the roots too much.
I agree. Although we do plant bigger, more mature trees. They just do a little better when they're started from seed.
Yeah.
Adrian, what's the beautiful, I thought I saw a question from Jim while I was saying that. Oh, I think we already addressed that.
Yeah. we did.
What's the beautiful essay written by Gerald Wilmhow about how to care for an oak?
Yeah, I think I don't remember the exact name, but it's how to give a young oak a home or something like that. You can
Oh,
do
Yeah, I'll
that's
see if I can quickly
lovely.
find that, because that's a really beautiful, and he talks about the idea of starting with a ring of sedges and then adding a ring of sedges each year. And the way
Oh,
he frames it is really beautiful.
Yeah,
I'll see if I
and
can
popping
find that
in,
quickly.
various little oak companion plants.
Mhm.
And here I want to give a plug for his and Laura Rorica's book, Flora of the Chicago Region, because you can look up, you have done this, Quercus bicolor or Quercus alba or any of the other oaks that are native here, and there will be a list of most of the companion plants, little forbs and sedges that you would
That's a fantastic resource.
find. Yeah, I have it right here. I will get it. Hold
Ooh,
on.
yippee. I'd love that too.
And the forest preserves of Cook County actually use this book as a guide when they're replanting areas.
That's flattering.
And
Congratulations.
well, and Laura Rorica actually works for the Forest Preserve, so that's also another thing. But
Yeah.
and she is a bee expert, non-Perel. Here is the flora of the Chicago region.
Oh, that's a hefty book.
It
Oh,
is, but
oh, wait, I have that in my office. Yes,
of course
I know
you
that
do.
one.
Yes,
Of course
you
I
have
do.
that book. Yes. Absolutely, you have that book.
Yep, I sure do.
But I just want to recommend it because if anyone, I've used it for years in my backyard. I'm like, if I buy a plant, I'm like, okay, so what goes with this? What sedges should I be putting in here?
Yeah.
It really helps.
Absolutely.
Really helps. And anyway, okay, back to sorry, I got excited there.
Never apologize for getting excited about trees.
Laura's used to it. Okay, so
I can't, unfortunately, I can't, I found that link, but the website is not responding.
Oh
So
no.
I can't open it.
Oh,
It's a
I know.
great-
Someone asked if you would hold the book up again so they can get a look at the title.
Okay. Let's see.
I know it's a workout to hold that thing up. It weighs like 5
It weighs
pounds.
10 pounds, just so you know. You got it?
Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh, Martha Intieri put a Google Drive file. I wonder if that's the one that.
Oh,
Yeah, check it. It's not responding for me.
well, because I'm not getting the Conservation Research Institute, which used to be his website.
Well, right. I wonder what happened. I have it down somewhere in my file, my oak file, but it would take me a few minutes to find it.
Thanks, Martha, for posting that.
I could, if I find it, we could just send, when I do the recording, we could just send that essay with the recording. So people could read it. Or what?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a great essay. And some oak essay.
Anything else?
I believe someone
I lost
asked about pruning, and I would love to mention.
Oh yeah.
Oaks and elms are two species that you should never, ever, ever, ever prune outside of their dormancy because they are so susceptible to disease. So you want to make sure it's winter, after at least the first frost, all the leaves are off, the tree is asleep. That's when you can prune off those lower branches if you like. And you want to do them correctly, not too flush to the tree or anything. I would actually recommend having a professional do it to make sure you preserve your lovely oak. But the most important thing is to remember the dormancy rule.
And someone did, going with that, someone asked, can you trim the lower branches?
Yes, that's what I was thinking of. But yeah, you can trim the lower branches if they're in the way, just as long as you make sure they are done correctly and they are done at the right time of year.
Possibility place, they always say, just leave the branches on the oak for as long as you can, because it
Preferably.
really helps.
But I know I get it. There has to be a compromise between humans and trees. And sometimes, while it's not great for the tree, lower branches have to come off for the sake of safety or for the sake of visibility and things like that.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too. They grow differently in the woods. In the woods,
Yes, they
grow up
do.
tall
Yes.
and not so many lower branches.
Yes, that is because oaks really like sunlight, and that's part of the issue they're running into is that they're having trouble competing with some invasives that are more shade tolerant and can take up a lot of the canopy because the oak, once it gets that break in that canopy, it's a race. She wants to get all the way up there so she can get the fuel to grow and make her big fat acorns. Oh, and just thought of this, apropos of nothing. Most species of oak trees don't produce acorns until they're like 20, 30, sometimes up to 50 years old. 50 to 80 is actually the peak age for when they are really producing acorns. But I think I may have mentioned there's a species of chinkapin, dwarf chinkapin oaks that can produce their acorns in like 2 or 3 years, which is exciting.
Oh, so I wanted to ask you about the dwarf chinkapin because we happened to be able to sell some this year at the plant sale. So
That's
that was really exciting.
I
for
may
us,
have
but-
glossed over it, and I don't know why, because that really is the dwarf chinkapin is interesting because it is one of the only, if not the only, shrubby oak we have. There's a lot of them over on the East Coast, but we don't have a whole lot of them here. And they're very, very small. And I actually can double check exactly how small they are. Let me see.
The Possibility Place website says about 10 feet
Yes, that sounds right.
is how tall they get. And Adrian, have you seen them in the wild?
No, I have not, but I would love to see one sometime.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, they're
Oh.
adorable. Jim,
yeah.
who was on this talk, bought one actually.
It would be a great.
Props to Jim. They've got the tiniest little adorable oak leaves.
Yeah,
So
they're
But,
teeny tiny little things, like a mini oak,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
It would be a
they're
great
cute.
garden tree, you know?
It would be
almost
a great garden tree for someone who really wants to
Yeah.
plant an oak because their buddy Cara pitched the oaks so well, but they don't have the space for them. So getting a dinky little dwarf chinkapin would be fantastic. Just as beneficial to the ecosystem.
Jim says come visit his tree.
Oh, thank you. Your tree got a name? I like to do that when I do plantings, especially with kids. We put a tree in the ground and I'm like, all right, what's this tree's name? Give me wild answers.
That's a great. I
No
imagine
name
you're
yet. That's okay.
terrific with the kids, planting with the kids. I'm sure you're great.
It's my favorite. I love it so much. Kids just get so excited when you hand them a shovel and I'm like, all right, dig. And they're like, really? Really? I get to dig? Kids deserve to dig.
Yeah, they do.
They do.
Deserve
I
to
agree
climb
with you.
trees. They deserve to dig. They deserve to just be outside playing in the woods.
They really do. I think it's like a human right, you know? You should be able to go out and play in the woods as a kid.
Mhm.
I think people who do grow up to be much more copacetic with nature, you know, closer.
Yeah. And I have a colleague, Jane, who does forest therapy walks that are really, really good. And she talks about how sometimes she gets people who get really, really emotional on these walks because they've just spent so much of their life not really connected to their natural ecosystem. And then when they do, it's really overwhelming and healing. And I just think it's so important, not just good for you, but vital, you know?
Yeah, I can definitely understand that because I know
Well said. I like that word, vital.
vital.
Mhm.
Yes,
And that's
Good,
something I'm
yeah.
always trying to preach with trees is they aren't just pretty things, they are completely and totally necessary for our own survival. You know, everything from,
Oh yeah.
flood mitigation, carbon sinking, shade, air cleaning even. I remember reading a study across several states after the loss of a bunch of trees to emerald ash borer specifically, they linked a few thousand human deaths to cardiac and respiratory diseases that were associated with the loss of those trees just from the loss of air quality. Incredible.
Startling, actually.
It really is, yeah.
all our relations. So, well, any more questions?
Any
Anybody?
questions you got? Don't have to be about oaks. They could even be about bugs. I like bugs. Cicadas like trees a lot, by the way, or oak trees a lot, by the way. It's one of their favorite species.
The cicada, is that what you said, cicadas?
Yes, cicadas.
Yeah.
We had that big
Oh.
cicada year.
Oh, yeah,
Or
we sure
getting
did.
into oak gall mites.
Yes, that was very annoying, wasn't it? I didn't care for that. I thought I had a
Really?
staph infection or something, and my doctor's like, no, it's these mites. Everyone's getting them.
No, it's
I-
not,
yeah.
even though there's a big ring, it's not Lyme disease, don't worry.
Yeah, scary, but small price to pay to
Mm-hmm.
coexist with our trees.
That's right.
Agreed.
All right, well,
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Well, first of all, thank you,
Yeah.
Cara, for being here today, and thank
Of
you,
course.
everyone who came. Adrian, any last words?
go out and water your oak trees.
Go out and water your
Yeah,
oak trees.
go water your oak. That's a good
Thank
parting
you. I really
word.
appreciate you guys inviting me here. I'm really amazed at your organization and all the cool stuff you do and how many
Oh,
trees
thank
you have. Oh my goodness. I didn't know you guys were also patrons of Possibility Place. We get a lot of our trees from them too.
Yeah,
So,
they're great.
thanks so
Great
much,
people.
guys. Go enjoy this
Thank
beautiful
you.
weather while you can.
Thank you, everyone, and you too, Cara.
Happy to do it. Let me know.
And we
Okay.
will post this after I finish editing it, and it'll be on our YouTube channel.
Exciting. I've never been on YouTube before.
Sorry. Thank you all.
A lot of times I
Bye-bye.
put the question Q&A, but I think I'm going to leave it in this time because there was so much interesting information.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. That's kind of my style. I like lecturing, but I really like conversation more, you know?
Mhm.
I like education to be led by the individual who is being educated.
That's
Yeah,
great.
you don't have to apologize. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye,
day,
everyone.
everybody. Bye.